Veronica, I'm so delighted to be here with you today. I'm Jamie Lynn Tatera with the We Are in It Together podcast here today with Veronica Diaz. Veronica Diaz is the mom of two children. She is also a yoga teacher, a mindful self-compassion teacher, has a degree in computer science, and worked as a director of engineering and project management. And additionally, she is a naturalized American citizen who was born in Mexico. And so she's here with us today to talk about how self-compassion can be healing for all, but particularly for people that come from groups that have experienced oppression, that maybe are currently experiencing oppression, and how self-compassion can help, and also how we can make self-compassion more accessible for all children and grown-ups and caregivers. And please do stay on totally on so we can tell you how you can help self-compassion to be accessible for all children and their caregivers. So welcome, Veronica. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you, Jamie Lynn. It's such a pleasure being here. I've followed you for a long time, and this is an honor to be here with you today. Thank you.
Wonderful. So can you tell us a little bit about your own story and kind of how you encountered self-compassion and why you feel like this is a really valuable resource for everyone, especially, I guess, in our context here. And, we focus a lot on children and caregivers. So I'd love to hear a little of your own story.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, like you mentioned, I was director of engineering. I was doing project management for a corporation here in the United States. Actually, this is how I initiated my path to citizenship through this company. So I worked there for about 22 years. And in the business of software, basically, you're supposed to deploy software with no errors, no issues with it. So we really have really high standards, right? And being a director and a project management, to be able to be successful, I needed to make sure things went flawless. On top of the fact that I am a minority twice, and actually, yeah, twice. One in the fact that the majority of the people there are males. So I was a woman, and also the majority of the people were Caucasian. So I was being Mexican. So I had to work twice, three times as hard to be where I was, and I started to notice how those tendencies in my personality became evident in my day-to-day personal life. So basically, a I have two children, right? Right now they're 5 years old and 7 years old. And during the pandemic, I decided to be a stay-home mom. During that process, I started to notice how I was pretty much treating my kids as they were like projects, right? Or software programs. I had super high expectations not only on myself, but on them. And I had super high expectations of my husband as well. And I can tell you pretty much that our lives were pretty miserable. It's like everybody was, they say, it's like, what is it saying? Happy wife, happy life, or like if the mom is happy, everybody's happy. Well, this is what was happening. Uh, and I was feeling like a failure too, because guess what? My kid was not meeting the milestones that they were supposed to be, right? One of my kids was walking late or not speaking on time. My other kid was not walking on time. And it's just a plethora of, you see, this mom is not good enough. She's not doing things right. Their kids are not good enough. So I just made it to myself to be like, okay, if I can, I mean, I worked in this company for so many years, I can take any, hard things. I'm gonna make this a success. And I just felt that when I couldn't control everybody else and I couldn't control situations, I just became very miserable. So that's what led me to self-compassion. It was actually thanks to a colleague, another yoga teacher that introduced me to Kristen Neff, and that's when I took the course online for self-compassion, and I took it with you, and and then you led me to the parent-child train classes, and I just fell in love with it, and I felt like these skills are the skills that I wish I had when I was a kid. And I feel like I would like for the entire world really to learn about self-compassion, regardless of where they come from, regardless of their upbringing, because these are skills that we all as human beings need, because we have all kinds of situations and all kinds of suffering in the world. Yeah,
Wow, thanks for sharing that. That's really profound and I think also very relatable. I know even as I'm listening to you, I'm like, oh, my children are not doing X. I'm like that idea of like what's wrong with me. This is such a common phenomenon and something that is so indicative of a need for self-compassion, right? Like a definite need for self-compassion. So I'm curious again, like just as you shared, like we all have different life experiences, and I'm really just passionate, I guess the word dedicated. Like just like a big flame fire in my heart, fire in my belly for helping particularly children have the resource of self-compassion. And similar to you, I think it's because I needed it when I was a kid and I didn't have it when I was a kid. And
same.
I want it for all children, but I want it the most for kids that need it the most, right? So kids that have neurodivergence, you know what I mean? Kids that maybe are receiving messages from society saying you have less value, right? Like I know right now, under our current leadership, there's all kinds of executive orders that are like anti-diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that my concern as someone who cares deeply about everyone, and again, especially children, is I don't want them to internalize the idea that there's anything wrong with them or that they are less than others because they come from a diverse background, right? That is not being valued. Maybe they also have linguistic diversity, which is, I'm really passionate to, like, again, I have to like hold back my passion, but like, no, but you know what I mean? But like, I want to make sure our podcast stays rooted in the topic, but just rather than viewing like linguistic diversity as a resource, right? So like one of the favorite places I like to volunteer is a school that like half the kids are native Spanish speakers, half the kids are native English speakers, and everybody's learning two languages. Wow. How beautiful,
Beautiful.
right? Because that linguistic resource can enrich everybody. But I think too many kids are getting the message that it's less than. And so I
Mhm.
guess that's my specific question for you. One, I know you grew up in Mexico, but just like, did you have experience of feeling in any way, immigrating to the United States, or just, again, even being someone living in this culture, this idea that somehow some of your resources were less than, and then how did that kind of shape your internal messaging, and how does self-compassion touch that?
Yeah, so I came here to study actually a college degree, my degree in computer sciences because I came here and most of I mean I come from a my family in Mexico is like low middle class, and somehow they acquire part of the money to send me to college over here. My sister was lucky enough to already be living here because she married an American that she met at the beach, so in Mexico. And so I was lucky enough to have a place to stay when I came. And my parents, it was a huge sacrifice, right? But the root of I'm gonna send my kids to the United States is what? Is that our our education in Mexico is not good enough, or everything that is American is better, right? So starting from there, right, they wanted something that was better for me. That was because somehow Mexico is not good enough, right? Or so that message was very internalized from, from very young. And yeah, definitely when I came over here already feeling less than, not knowing the language 100%. I mean, I was also privileged enough to go to a private school in Mexico. Again, being a lower middle class, it was a great struggle. And I learned English. So when I came here, it was not 100%. I mean, I knew some English from my classes and everything, but I was afraid of speaking it. I didn't have any American friends. I was I was worried. When American friends or when American people would laugh and maybe look at me, I would immediately think that they're laughing at me, right? I do remember having a class in anthropology actually, and um, a one of the students there mentioned that, oh yeah, we know about Mexicans. All they do is sleep, and they're with a hat on. It's like that's what I know about Mexico. And to me, that was very like, you have no idea. I mean, number one, I'm from Mexico City. We don't take siestas, you know? And the reason why siesta exists is because the sun is so hot in some parts of the country that they can literally cannot work. They cannot work during that part of the day, or else they'll have heat strokes, right? So yeah, so those are kind of like the messages that I was getting coming in here. And also the feeling of not being good enough also make me uh how can I say, maybe gravitate towards the international students more than the Americans. So I say felt safer hanging out with people that were like me from other countries than it was from Americans. So that was like the first of my experience. Yeah.
Yes, and again, I like just sending compassion as a, you know what I mean? I don't know. I like to again talk about cultural humility. I do know what it's like to be a female in a male dominant society. I do not know what it's like to be, a linguistic or a racial minority in, a predominantly, honestly, like our culture can be very, male kind of superiority and white superiority. It's like it's kind of embedded in our culture in a way that is not healthy, truthfully, for anyone, right? We all benefit when there's a diverse richness and it's all valued. So I just want to acknowledge like appreciation for you sharing, and also a cultural humility that I don't know what that experience is like. um how would you say those messages, I guess kind of a twofold question. Those and you've some of this you've touched on already, but how did the internalization of that affect you? And then how how could self-compassion have helped then, and how does it help now for whatever has been internalized of those negative messages?
So like if I had already known self-compassion at that time, how could have
Yeah.
happened?
What might that again, like, and sometimes we can't know, but I mean that's what I do sometimes when I think of myself as a teen. Like if I had known self-compassion, would I maybe have not become addicted to alcohol? Would I maybe have not had an eating disorder? Like would I maybe have had some resources to name what was happening, to question the internalization of self-blame? Because, and I don't know if that was part of your experience, but I know we talked about in parenting, sometimes there can be this tendency to think something's wrong with me. I would imagine that when society is giving you a message that your language, that your ethnic culture, you know what I mean, is like somehow inferior, that it would be very natural to start to think something's wrong with me, right? Like to internalize these messages, and how self-compassion could maybe be a buffer for some of this, or help us to cope with some of this, or help us to push back, externally, but also push back on the internalization of these messages.
Yeah, so thanks for bringing that up. So one of the things to me was while I was going to college in particular is that if I had known already self-compassion, I felt like I would have I would have handled it better, especially the socialization part. I feel like knowing that number one, it is true that I'm not alone, right? That other people who are coming from other countries probably feel that way, which is why they tended to stay in their own groups, right? Um, and and in particular, it was probably easier in that they had the groups. There were lots of like Indian people, Asian people. So it's just, but they stayed together, right? Would not mingle with other societies. And so knowing that I'm not alone. It probably would have given me the strength to maybe we could be together, right? Together, we're stronger, I guess, and to be more courageous to try to make a friend from America, because guess what? They're also people like us, and they also have something to offer. But my fear, my inferiority complex, or my feeling not good enough was already feeling like I was gonna get rejected anyway. So why should I try? Why should I try to learn? Why should I try to be friends with other people? I would yeah, I would also maybe swap, knowing the self-compassion practice of what would you tell your friends. So what would I tell if I was Caucasian, right? And I see a new immigrant person, what would I tell them, right? Me knowing all my history, knowing that this is a hard life leaving your country behind for a new, I mean, leaving your whole family, really, you know. What can I tell them? Maybe realizing that I not everybody sees the same way, and maybe I could see myself with the eyes of more compassion, if that makes sense.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm, mhm. Absolutely. And as you're talking about this, I'm thinking always, especially for our new listeners, it's good to define what self-compassion is. Oftentimes I start an episode with this, kind of using the word self-compassion, throwing it around. And so you're kind of highlighting some of the elements of self-compassion, right? So, and again, I have my little animals here I sometimes like to use with kids, but I feel like they can be helpful for grown-ups too, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
like being able to, this little giraffe named spot when we're struggling, right? Like to be present with it, not necessarily overwhelmed and consumed by it, but rather aware. Wow, this is a difficult experience, right? Like, wow, I am having a hard time. And then you really touched on that second component, which is our little buddy, our little puppy dog buddy that reminds us that we're human beings having a human experience. So you talked about the idea that other immigrants have these same kind of challenges, and ultimately the people that from the US that maybe didn't share this background of like being immigrants in their lifetime, right? So like my ancestors came from Poland, right? But like it's like far removed, and again, like we are able to assimilate into dominant culture here, but we're still human beings, right? So like being able to see the humanness underneath it. And then the last component you were talking about was this sense of kindness, which I use this snuggles habit. And I would imagine too that even being able to think, because I use this sometimes with my daughter who has, my older daughter has dyslexia. And sometimes she can get hard on herself because she struggles with reading and she'll compare herself to kids that are not dyslexic. And sometimes I'll say, okay, do you know any other kids that have dyslexia? And she can think of one, right? I'm like,
Right.
what would you say to that girl if she were thinking she were not good enough? And she'd say, oh, I would tell her she's doing great, right? She's able to access that voice of kindness. And then I'll be able to use that as a touch tone to say, can you give that message to yourself, sweetie? And so just that idea again of self-compassion being taking that kindness we might direct towards another and doing a little U-turn and
Right.
directing it towards yourself. Again, it's not about me only, it's about me too.
Right. So exactly. So can I be kind to myself? Can I see myself through the eyes of you're not alone, you're not different, there's nothing wrong with you, right? And you also are a human being, you know? Yeah, exactly.
Oh, beautiful. So bringing this kind of full circle to, I know right now you're doing a fundraising effort, which I am deeply appreciative of. So this idea that right now we've got these fabulous resources for kids to help kids grow the resource of self-compassion. So I've got a parent-child class, which is accessible for some people, but then I developed, these workbook for kids, the Mindfulness and Self-Compassion workbook for kids, volumes 1 and 2, which I've been using with kids in schools, parent groups are using together. They're a phenomenal and accessible way for kids to grow that kind inner voice that can be supportive when adversity comes. Um, unfortunately, they are only available in English, right? Which, like,
Yeah.
again, limits our scope of being able to reach diverse groups, whether that be in the United States itself, like that bilingual school I talked about, where kids are learning in multi languages. Now you only have a book in one language. Like, wouldn't it be nice to have one? Or kids that are still learning English. And then also, I know just yesterday, I had somebody who's doing the like that's training to teach children self-compassion. She's been working with like children that are in vulnerable contexts in Colombia.
Mhm.
And she's been doing this for a decade and a half. And she would really love to have a really accessible resource like the workbook for children in Spanish so that she can help kids that are growing up with adversity, like big adversity, to like have that internal resource so that they know that they are a good person. So they know that their difficult circumstances are not their fault. And so they can support themselves with tender kindness and also like a fierce sense of like, I can overcome hard things to be their best selves. So can you tell us a little bit about kind of what brought you to this fundraising effort, maybe how people could help if they're interested? Yeah.
Yeah, so I actually I was training to teach the course, the MSCCC course, when I went to Mexico
Which is
last summer.
parent-child self-compassion for those who are not
Yes,
mindfulness and self-compassion for children and caregivers. Yes. Okay.
thanks. And so and I needed to get my basically my hours, my training hours teaching. And I happened to be in Mexico at that time. And so when I did that, I was like, oh my goodness, wouldn't it be great to teach this in Spanish? And so for me, it was like, yes, it's like reaching to the outside of the borders, right? And so I started contacting schools. Unfortunately, I had only 2 months, and to be able to build the connections, I mean, it probably would need more than 2 months. So it didn't go to pass, on top of the fact that the resources and everything were in English, right? So I would have to translate, some of the pamphlets and whatnot, or, like handouts and things like that. The teacher training even, right? But so, but then when I saw these books and I saw absolutely, so I do have them, by the way, just,
Uh-huh.
and my kids absolutely love them. And so that with a combination of knowing that me I see little Veronica as a little girl speaking Spanish, being able to do this in Spanish, right? Mindfulness, self-compassion work for kids. So I think that if we can provide this in Spanish, and why just in Spanish, right? Let's do it in French. Let's do it in all the other languages so
Which
we
we
can reach the
are.
entire world.
Sorry to
Yes,
interrupt, but yes, there's somebody translating
yes,
into French right now. Yes. Uh-huh.
yes. Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. So, yeah, because it's like this has no borders, absolutely no borders. And so we're doing a fundraising to try to get these books translated to Spanish and also formatted digitally and in print so that they can be available in Spanish. And so we have created a Better World campaign. We are probably going to have some perks there. So I'm really super excited about that. And hopefully, maybe on the notes of your podcast, you can send the link to that, whomever's interested in donating, uh, and help us this dream become a reality, because it's just we'll be able to provide them for children in America as well, in schools who are here, but also anybody who speaks Spanish in anywhere in the world. And so, because like I said, yes, these skills are really needed worldwide. And also, I just wanted to mention too is that, culturally speaking, a lot of these cultures that we came up with, we came up historically speaking, there was a lot of oppression, especially from the European world, right? So in without getting too philosophical, it's really deep into the culture's consciousness, um, that maybe we are not good enough, and that the conquest people, the conquistadors, are better, which is really deep into our psyche, which I think this is, that kind of feeling not good enough shows up in like sports and like the Olympics and like uh the World Cup and lots of people feeling, oh, lost Mexico again. Well, of course they're gonna lose, or whatever, because we're just not good enough, right? We're just not like America. It's always this feeling of not being good enough, which is also why lots of is the need of feeling good enough. Well, maybe if I go to America, maybe I'll be good enough. So it's just how about maybe we can have some skills. Maybe we can help ourselves not feel not having those feelings that are very freezing, that that make leave you lead into anxiety and depression that is so much common nowadays, especially among kids. And then with the rise of social media and the comparison with other kids, right? And the school shootings out there in America, and of course all of the other world issues, people fleeing their countries to trying to, seek, for uh, seek safety somewhere. So, anyway, so that's what we're doing, and so I really hope that you guys can help us make this dream come true. And so we'll send the link later time.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Veronica. And that, and I'll just piggyback on that for a moment, and then we'll close talking a little bit more about resources that everyone can use. But I know I have a dear friend from college. She did her master's in special education, and she's worked in bilingual education. And interestingly enough, she ended up marrying somebody from Mexico and lived in Mexico, had four children in Mexico, and she lived in Cuernavaca, which is a couple of hours from Mexico City. But she ended up moving to the United States like maybe 4 years ago, because there was a child, like the drug cartels in Mexico were big. There was a child at her school that got abducted by, and she just was like, she felt like she couldn't, as her kids were becoming teens, let her kids just like be teens and like go to the store and accompany. Like she felt a fear for their safety, right? So as an American citizen, she was able to move. She moved to Salinas, which is like a city in California that's very diverse and has a lot of Spanish speaking people. And anyways, she has a lot of people that are around her that are here, that came to the United States for these same reasons of seeking safety. And now, and some people came here legally, some people didn't. And I don't want to get into the whole legality of like what should be done with people that are not here legally. Okay, like I just don't want to unpack that right now. But what I do know is there's a whole lot of kids that are feeling unsafe, and a
Yes.
whole lot of families that are feeling unsafe. And watching what's going on, again, as somebody that cares deeply about the well-being of families, the well-being of children, it's like I just want to see. I can't control executive orders. I can't control the rhetoric of making people feel unsafe going to school, right? I can't control this, but maybe I can get this resource, again, such a small thing. I can help to support, your efforts, you and Mercy, who are doing this fundraiser of getting this translated into Spanish, getting this into schools in California, you know what I mean? So that more kids know you are valuable, you are loved, you can notice what's going on inside yourself, you can respond with kindness. So that they have the resources they need to deal with the fear and to deal with the negative messages, and hopefully again come out more okay on the other side.
Yes. Wonderful. I hate those stories. Yeah, there's all kinds of stories out there like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you're somebody that's listening right now that you want to feel, because I think so many Americans, no matter what their origin are, they care and they want to help, and there's this feeling of helplessness.
Hmm.
And so this is something that people who care, that want to support the well-being of all people, that want to support diversity, this is something you can do to make a difference,
That's
which
right.
I do think and maybe that's kind of where we can kind of bring our podcast episode to like a close. But just, do you want to speak a little bit about that feeling of, and maybe this is part of why you're doing it. Just we talk about Snuggles being comforting, this little bunny that we have that is the kindness aspect, but also Snuggles being super Snuggles, just how this might show up in your own life, and maybe even in this project, just this idea of being able to take action to support your well-being, to take action to, kind of push back on the internalization of difficult messages.
Yeah, I mean, translating this book is definitely one of the things that I feel like is an external action that I could do to make an impact. Yeah. And also, whatever, basically whatever, what can I do, right? Is Google is Doodle's habit too,
Yes, yes, taking
Is
action. Yeah,
yes,
that's my
taking
little
action.
dolphin here. Yes, taking action. And this is
Yes.
self-compassion in daily life. Yes,
Yes. Yes. What can I do? And like you mentioned earlier, we can't really control executive orders. We can't really control, there's a lot of things, right? But we can control what we do. We can control what we do with our money, what we used to, how we choose to use our money, how our time, our skills, And so at this point in my life, this is what I'm doing, right? I'm using my Spanish skills to try to help bring a little bit of um, some goodness in the world. So I'm really thankful for that, by the way.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And by the way, Veronica and I are also teaching, like for a research study, we're teaching a parent-child self-compassion class in Spanish for the first time, which is really
Yes.
exciting. Again, helping resources reach more people so that we have more collective well-being. So is there a place, I know I've got stuff on my own website, jamielintatera.com, for people that want to learn more, and I will link your fundraiser into my website as well. But is there a place where people can go to learn more about the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I have a website. It's veronicadiaz.co. Veronicadiaz.co is my website.
Oh,
And
.co, .co.
CO.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And you can sign up for any kind of news of my classes coming up, my Spanish class coming up. I have uh, a little story of why I got into self-compassion. I've already shared it with you. But if you know anybody who is interested in the skills of self-compassion, or who knows anybody that would benefit from the skills, parents or children, please let us know. And you know, uh, me from the Spanish side, I guess. I and Yeah, so we'll just look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Veronica.
The world keeps turning, things change. We have new obstacles that are thrown in our way. In our way. You can't let it hold us down. Together we'll get around. You just have to look inside, and you will find that we are in it together. I know it in my heart. You are not alone. You are not, and we are in it together. I've known it from the start. You are not alone. You are not alone. You might feel lonely and down. You might be thinking things will always be this way. Be this way. But you got a friend in you. Self-compassion will get you through. You just have to look inside, and you will find that we are in it together. I know it in my heart. You are not alone. You are not, and we are in it together. I've known it from the start. You are not alone. You are not alone. We've got Bunny. You're not alone. Doodles, what can you do? Spots, we can be aware. And Snuggles, I care about you. When life gets hard, we're resilient. We'll get through it. We're resilient. We'll get through it. We're resilient. We'll get through. And we are in it together. I know it in my heart. You are not inside of you.